Rami was a boy who had no home. He lived on the streets of a small human colony on the edge of known space. The colony was not rich. The houses were built from metal sheets and stone. The streets were narrow and the lights often flickered when the power was weak. Rami had grown used to hunger, to cold nights, and to the way people walked past him as if he was invisible. He had no family. No one knew his exact age, but he looked younger than the years he carried on his thin shoulders. Every morning, Rami searched for scraps. Sometimes he found a half-eaten loaf of bread near the market. Sometimes he got lucky and carried water for a vendor who gave him a small piece of fruit. He never begged loudly. He had learned that people grew angry if a boy asked too much. Instead, he worked in silence, hoping for kindness that rarely came. His most valued treasure was an old blanket. It was rough and torn at the edges, but it kept him warm during the cold nights. Without it, he would not sleep at all. That night, the wind blew harder than usual. The air was dry and sharp, cutting across the stone paths of the colony. Rami wrapped the blanket tight around his shoulders and sat under a broken roof that gave him some shelter. He closed his eyes and tried to rest, but then he heard something strange. It was not the sound of footsteps nor the usual hum of generators. It was heavier, uneven, like someone dragging themselves across the ground. Rami opened his eyes and looked down the alley. At first he thought it was a drunk man, but as his sight cleared, he froze. A figure lay collapsed near the shadows. Its body was larger than a human's, the skin pale with strange markings that glowed faintly in the moonlight. Its chest rose and fell slowly, and each breath seemed painful. The hands were not quite human, with long fingers and ridges along the skin. Rami's heart raced. He had heard of aliens from traders who visited the colony. Some said aliens were cruel. Others said they were just different, but he had never seen one himself. This creature looked like it was dying. For a long moment, Rami did not move. He felt fear rise inside him. What if it was dangerous? What if others came searching for it? What if soldiers appeared and accused him of helping an enemy? But then he saw the eyes. They opened just a little, and in them he saw no anger. They were filled with weakness, like the eyes of someone who had fought too long and now only wanted to live a little more. Rami remembered how he often felt the same when hunger burned inside him, when no one cared if he survived another day. Something in those eyes broke through his fear. He stepped closer. The alien tried to speak, but only a faint sound came out. The voice was rough, the words impossible for Rami to understand. Its chest rose and fell with effort, and its body shivered. It was cold, maybe colder than Rami himself. The boy stood over it, clutching his blanket. That blanket was the only thing keeping him alive at night. Without it, the winds would freeze him. His stomach tightened at the thought of letting it go. If he gave it to the alien, he might not survive the night himself. He looked at the pale skin, the trembling body, and felt torn between his need and the stranger's suffering. For several minutes, Rami stood in silence, thinking. No one else was coming. No one would ever know if he helped or walked away, but something inside him whispered that if he left, this creature would die here alone, just as forgotten as he often felt. He took a deep breath. Then with hands that shook, he lowered the blanket and placed it over the alien's body. The alien shivered under the fabric. Its eyes opened again, and for a moment they seemed brighter. It made a faint sound, softer this time, almost like a sigh of relief. Rami crouched beside it and pulled the blanket tighter around its chest. He whispered words it could not understand. You must live. Do not give up. The alien's hand moved slowly, as if it wanted to reach out. The fingers brushed against Rami's arm before falling back. The boy felt the weight of that small touch. He had given away the only thing he owned, but somehow he did not feel empty. Instead, he felt as if he had done something that mattered. The night grew colder. Rami had no cover now. He curled against the wall, wrapping his thin arms around himself. His teeth chattered and his body shook. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep, though the cold bit into him. Hunger and wind pressed against him from every side, yet his mind stayed with the alien beside him. He wondered who it was, where it came from, and if it had family waiting far away. Hours passed slowly. At times he thought the alien's breathing stopped, but then he would hear it again, faint but steady. Rami whispered softly to it, as if speaking to himself. He told the alien about the streets, about how he lived day to day, about the way people ignored him. He told it that sometimes the stars above made him dream of flying away, of finding a place where he was not forgotten. He did not know if the alien understood, but the act of speaking warmed his heart more than the blanket ever had. As the night reached its deepest hour, Rami felt his strength fading. His body ached from cold and his eyelids grew heavy. He thought of the blanket one last time, wondering if he had made a mistake. But when he looked again at the alien covered and breathing, he felt peace. Maybe tomorrow would be worse for him. Maybe he would wake weaker than before, but tonight he had saved something. That thought was enough to let him drift into restless sleep. The morning light came slowly. When Rami opened his eyes, the space beside him was empty. The alien was gone. The blanket too was gone. For a moment, Rami felt a sharp pain in his chest. He had given everything to a stranger who had vanished without a word. He pulled his knees to his chest, shivering against the cold. Yet deep inside he felt a strange hope. Maybe the alien had lived because of him. Maybe his small act had reached farther than he could see. Rami stood up and walked into the morning streets. People were busy with their lives, trading goods, carrying tools, talking loudly. No one noticed him as he passed, thin and tired. But in his heart he carried the memory of the night, a secret act of kindness that belonged only to him and the stars above. And though he did not know it yet, that choice would change everything. The sun rose slowly over the colony, painting the streets with pale light. The walls of the buildings glowed faintly, and the early workers came out to prepare for the day. The air was cool and smoke drifted upward from cooking fires. For most people, it was an ordinary morning. For Rami, it was the start of a day without his only blanket. He rubbed his arms and tried to keep himself warm. His body still shook from the cold of the night. When he looked at the spot where the alien had been, he saw nothing. The blanket was gone, and so was the strange figure. The alley looked normal again, as if nothing had happened. For a moment, Rami wondered if it had all been a dream. Maybe his tired mind had imagined the creature, but he remembered the touch on his arm, the sound of the alien's breath, and the way its eyes had met his. It had been real. Rami stood there for a long time. A part of him hoped the alien had lived, that it had walked away into safety. Another part of him feared the worst. If it had died, maybe someone had taken the body before dawn. The thought made his stomach feel heavy. He wanted to believe that his choice had mattered. Hunger soon reminded him of his own needs. He had no food since yesterday. His thin legs carried him toward the marketplace where vendors were setting up their stalls. The air was filled with the smell of baked bread and fresh fruit. He watched carefully, waiting for a chance to help someone or gather scraps. A woman carrying baskets noticed him and frowned. "Go away, boy. No work here?" Rami lowered his eyes and walked on. He did not argue. He never argued. He found a corner near the well where he could watch people without being chased away. Children his age laughed as they ran past, holding sweetbread in their hands. Rami's stomach twisted with longing, but he stayed quiet. As the day passed, he managed to find half a piece of bread near a stall. It was old and dry, but he ate it slowly, grateful for every bite. He washed it down with water from the well. It was not enough, yet it kept him standing. He had learned to survive on little, but all day his mind returned to the alley. He kept wondering if the alien was still alive, somewhere out there. He thought of its strange skin and the sound of its voice. He thought of how it had looked at him, not as an enemy, but as someone who mattered. No one in the colony ever looked at him that way. As the sun began to fall, strange whispers spread through the streets. People pointed at the sky. Rami followed their gaze and saw something unusual. Far above the colony, small lights flickered against the fading daylight. At first they looked like stars, but they moved too quickly. They shifted across the sky in patterns like a group of birds flying together. The older traders argued about it. "Just meteors passing by," one man said. "No, those are engines," another replied. "Ships moving in formation." The governor's guards walked through the market, their faces tense. They told people to stay calm, but their voices carried unease. Rami felt the same unease grow in his chest. He wondered if those lights had something to do with the alien he had helped. That night, the colony was restless. People locked their doors earlier than usual. Rami had no door to lock. He wandered the streets until he found a quiet place near the wall of an abandoned warehouse. Without his blanket, the cold struck him harder. He curled against the wall, pulling his knees to his chest. His body trembled, but his thoughts kept him awake. The lights in the sky had not faded. He could still see them, glowing faintly above the colony. He tried to count them, but there were too many. The way they moved reminded him of soldiers marching. A memory returned to him, the alien lying weak in the alley, covered by his blanket. Was there a connection? Could it be that those lights were searching for the missing one? Rami closed his eyes, but sleep did not come easily. Every sound of the night seemed louder than usual. The howl of the wind, the creak of old metal roofs, the distant hum of generators. And beneath it all he thought he heard something else, a low vibration in the air. It was not strong, only a faint tremor that passed through the ground. He pressed his hand to the dirt and felt it again. It reminded him of the sound of engines. When morning came again, the colony was alive with tension. Soldiers filled the streets. They carried rifles and wore heavy armor, their boots striking loudly on the stone. The governor himself spoke from a platform, telling the people that everything was under control. He said the lights in the sky were being watched, that there was no danger. But his voice did not sound certain. Rami stayed at the edge of the crowd. He listened carefully, though most ignored him as always. A man near him whispered, "I heard one of them was found last night, hurt and alone." Another man frowned. "Where did you hear that?" From a guard. "They say someone helped it." Rami's heart skipped a beat. He turned away quickly, afraid someone would see his face. If the guards were searching, they might discover what he had done. Would they punish him, or would they punish the alien if they caught it again? All day long, the rumors grew. Some said the lights were warships preparing to attack. Others said they were scouts testing human defenses. A few believed they were only passing by. The people argued in the streets, fear spreading through every word. Rami stayed silent. He kept thinking of the alien's eyes, weak but gentle, and the way it had touched his arm before disappearing. He could not believe such a being had come only to harm them. There had to be more to the story. That night, as he sat alone under the stars, the lights in the sky grew brighter. They were no longer distant. He could see their shapes now, long and sharp, glowing faintly at the edges. They moved together, slow and steady, like a great tide rolling across the heavens. The ground trembled more strongly this time. Dust rose from the streets and the air filled with a strange hum. People ran from their houses, pointing and shouting. Some prayed, others hid. The governor's guards shouted orders, but their voices were drowned by the sound that filled the sky. Rami's heart pounded. He felt both fear and hope at once. He thought of the night he had given away his blanket. He thought of the whisper he had spoken. "You must live." Maybe those words had carried farther than he ever imagined. Above him, the first great shadow passed over the colony. A ship larger than anything he had ever seen slid across the sky, its hull black against the stars, its lights glowing like fire. Behind it came more, dozens, maybe hundreds, moving as one. The people screamed, but Rami stood still. He whispered to himself, "They have come." And deep in his heart, he knew this was only the beginning. The ground shook as the great ship settled above the colony. Dust rose from the streets and roofs rattled as if they might break apart. The sound was like thunder, a deep rumble that rolled across every stone and wall. People screamed and rushed to hide inside their homes. Soldiers raised their weapons and took position near the gates. Rami stood in the open square with his hands pressed to his chest. His heart raced, but he could not look away from the sky. The ship was enormous, larger than anything humans had ever built. Its surface gleamed like dark metal, and strange symbols glowed along its sides. Lights flickered like fire across its edges, and its shadow covered half the colony. Other ships followed behind it, smaller but still larger than any human craft. They moved in perfect formation, circling the colony like guardians. The sound of their engines filled the air, steady and powerful. Everyone could feel the vibration in their bones. The governor shouted for calm, but no one listened. Mothers pulled children inside. Traders left their goods and ran. Even the soldiers looked unsure, their rifles shaking in their hands. The colony was small, weak, and poor. Against such power they had no chance if the aliens meant harm. Then the great ship lowered a ramp. It was wide as a street, stretching down slowly until it touched the ground. Smoke drifted out from inside and a low hum filled the air. Every eye was fixed on the ramp, waiting for the first sign of what would come. From the mist, figures appeared. Tall, armored warriors stepped forward, their movements sharp and controlled. Their armor gleamed silver and black, shaped with ridges that caught the light. Each carried a weapon unlike anything humans had seen, long and curved, glowing faintly at the tips. They marched in silence, rows upon rows, each step falling in perfect rhythm. The sound of their boots was heavy, echoing across the square. They did not raise their weapons. Instead, they held them at their sides as if showing discipline rather than threat. 200 of them filled the square, standing in formation so precise that it looked like one living wall of strength. The people gasped and hid behind corners, staring with wide eyes. Fear ran through the colony like fire. At the front of the formation, one figure stepped ahead. Taller than the others, wearing armor marked with golden lines, the leader walked with calm power. In his hands he carried something. He raised it high for all to see. Rami's breath caught in his throat. His eyes widened. It was his blanket, the old torn, weathered cloth wrapped neatly and held as if it were treasure. The crowd whispered in shock. To them it was just a rag. To Rami it was the piece of himself he had given away. His heart pounded and his legs trembled. He wanted to cry out, but no sound came. The alien leader's voice rang out strong and clear, though at first the words were strange. A device on his chest glowed, and suddenly the people heard the words in their own tongue. This was given to one of ours. It was given in kindness, without fear, without demand. It was given by a child who had nothing, yet shared all. By this gift we saw the heart of your people. The crowd fell silent. Soldiers lowered their rifles slowly. The governor stepped forward, his face pale, his voice shaking. Who are you? What do you want here? The leader turned his gaze toward the governor, then to the people, and finally toward the edge of the crowd where Rami stood half hidden. His eyes glowed faintly, not with anger but with recognition. He lifted the blanket higher. The one who gave this saved our kin. We come not as conquerors. We come to honor. The people gasped again. Their fear turned to confusion. Whispers spread quickly through the crowd. A boy had given this thing, a boy had saved. An alien Rami felt every eye turning in his direction. His knees weakened. He wanted to run, but he could not move. The leader pointed toward him, and one of the warriors stepped forward, motioning with a hand. Come, the leader said. Rami's feet felt heavy, but somehow he walked. Step by step he moved through the crowd. People parted, staring at him as if seeing him for the first time. For years they had ignored him, passed him by as if he was nothing. Now they watched him as if he carried the weight of the stars. When he reached the front, the leader lowered himself slightly, so his towering height did not crush the boy's spirit. He held out the blanket. You gave this when you had nothing. You saved one of us. That act has brought us here. Rami stared at the blanket, tears filling his eyes. He touched it gently, feeling the rough fabric that had kept him alive for so many nights. Then he looked up at the alien leader. I only wanted him to live, Rami whispered. The translator on the leader's chest repeated the words for all to hear. The people gasped again. Many lowered their heads, ashamed that the boy they had ignored had done something greater than any of them. The leader placed a hand on Rami's shoulder. His voice carried across the square. This child showed us what your kind is. Not power, not wealth, but kindness. We are warriors, yet we honor such strength above all. He raised his hand, and the 200 warriors struck their weapons against the ground in perfect rhythm. The sound was like thunder rolling across the colony, not in threat but in salute. Rami stood frozen, overwhelmed. He had never felt important. He had never been noticed. Now he stood at the center of the colony, honored by beings from the stars. The governor stepped forward again, his voice trembling. Then you come in peace. The leader looked at him with calm eyes. We come because of him. As long as we stand, no harm shall come to this place. His gift is now our bond. The people erupted in shouts, some of relief, some of awe. Children pointed at Rami with wide eyes. Traitors whispered to each other, their fear turning into wonder. Soldiers lowered their weapons fully, no longer ready to fight. Rami felt dizzy. He had done nothing but give away an old blanket. Yet that small act had brought 200 alien warriors to his home. He clutched the fabric to his chest and closed his eyes. The leader spoke again, his voice deep and firm. This colony is under our protection. To the stars beyond it will be known, and this child will be remembered. Once more the warriors struck the ground with their weapons, the sound echoing like a vow. Rami stood among them, no longer invisible, no longer forgotten. His story had begun with hunger and cold, but now it was carried on the voices of warriors who came from the stars. And though he could not yet understand the weight of what was happening, he felt it in his heart. Life had changed. The colony would never be the same again. The square was still filled with silence after the alien leader's words. The people stood frozen, unable to believe what they had just heard. Soldiers who had once pointed their rifles at the sky now looked at the boy in front of them, the boy they had ignored for years. Mothers held their children close, whispering about the promise of protection. Traders lowered their goods, their voices trembling as they tried to understand how a boy with nothing had drawn an army of warriors to their small colony. Rami clutched the blanket close to his chest. His thin fingers gripped it as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. The cloth was torn and stained, but now it seemed to shine brighter than gold. He felt the weight of every eye on him. For the first time, people saw him not as a shadow on the street, but as someone who had changed their fate. The alien leader raised his hand, and the warriors behind him straightened their formation. Their weapons gleamed in the sunlight, and their armor shone like polished stone. The leader's voice carried across the square, calm yet powerful. "Hear us, people of this world. We did not come to take, we did not come to rule. We came because one of ours fell and one of yours gave him life again. The one you call a boy showed us a truth that cannot be ignored." The translator on his chest repeated the words perfectly in the human tongue. The people shifted uneasily, unsure if they should cheer, kneel, or simply stay silent. The governor cleared his throat and stepped forward, trying to keep his voice steady. "You say he saved one of yours. Who was this one, and why was he here alone?" The leader's eyes glowed faintly. He did not speak quickly. Instead, he let the silence build before answering. "He was a scout, a watcher. We sent him to your world not to harm but to see. We wished to know if humanity could be trusted, if there was honor in your hearts. He traveled alone so that no army would bring fear. He traveled in silence so that no weapon would bring harm. But the journey weakened him and his strength failed. He was left dying in your streets." Rami felt his heart tighten. He remembered the pale skin, the weak breath, the way the alien had looked at him with eyes full of pain. The leader continued. "Many passed him by. Many saw his weakness and did nothing. But this child, with no roof and no bread, gave the one thing he had, a simple blanket yet more valuable than jewels. In that gift we saw the truth. In the act of the forgotten we saw the strength of your kind," the crowd murmured. Some lowered their heads in shame. They remembered the boy sitting in alleys, the boy they had ignored while they walked past. Now they saw how his small kindness had brought protection greater than any army of men. The governor looked shaken. His voice was softer now, and because of this, "You came with an army," the leader nodded once. "We are not conquerors. We are guardians. Our warriors march not to destroy but to honor. This boy is proof that humanity values life even when it has little. For that reason, we stand with you. No enemy shall break this colony while we remain." A sound rose from the warriors behind him. They struck their weapons against the ground again, a steady rhythm that echoed like thunder across the colony square. It was not a sound of war. It was a vow. Rami felt tears on his face. He wiped them quickly, afraid someone would see, but no one mocked him. No one laughed. Instead, the people stared with respect, with awe, as if he carried the voice of the stars. The governor turned to the people. "This child saved us. By his hand, our colony is safe." The words spread quickly. Whispers turned into shouts, and shouts turned into cheers. For the first time, Rami heard his name called by voices that once ignored him. Children pointed at him, smiling with wide eyes. Traders spoke his name as if it carried weight. Soldiers lowered their heads to him, honoring his act. The leader looked down at Rami again. His voice softened, almost gentle. "You spoke to our fallen one in the night. You told him not to give up. He remembered your words, even in his weakness. Those words reached us across the stars." Rami's eyes widened. He had not thought anyone had heard him. He had whispered to the alien because he was afraid of silence, because he wanted the stranger to live. He had never believed his words would matter. Now he understood that they had carried farther than he could ever imagine. The leader raised his hand to the sky. "This colony will be under our watch. We will stand guard, not for gold, not for power, but for the kindness of one child. Let the stars know that we found honor here." The warriors lifted their weapons and crossed them above their chests in salute. The sight was so powerful that many in the crowd gasped. Rami stared at them, his heart pounding. He felt smaller than ever, yet greater than he had ever been. The governor bowed his head, his pride broken. He spoke in a voice full of humility. "We thank you for your protection. We thank you for seeing in us what we did not see ourselves." The leader gave no grand reply, only a steady nod. His eyes returned to Rami. "You will walk with us. You will see what your act has done. You will not be forgotten." Rami's breath caught. He had lived all his life invisible, passed over as if he did not exist. Now a voice from the stars told him he would be remembered. He looked at the blanket in his arms. It was torn and old, yet it had become the bridge between two worlds. That evening the colony changed. Where once there had been fear, there was hope. Where once there had been doubt, there was pride. People spoke of the boy with respect, and children played in the streets chanting his name. For the first time, Rami was not hungry for attention. He had more than he ever thought possible. But deep inside, he did not feel pride alone. He felt something larger, something heavy. His act had brought protection, but it had also brought responsibility. He wondered what it meant to walk with the aliens, what it meant to carry the trust of his people. That night, as the stars shone bright and the great ships hovered above the colony, Rami lay awake. He held the blanket close and thought of the scout he had saved. Somewhere among the ships that alien lived, carrying the memory of his kindness. Rami closed his eyes and whispered again, though no one was there to hear. "You must live. We must all live." And though he did not know what the future held, he felt ready to face it. For he was no longer the boy forgotten by the streets. He was the boy who had given his only blanket to a dying stranger, and in return he had been given a bond that reached across the stars. The days that followed the arrival of the alien warriors were unlike anything the colony had ever seen. The streets that once echoed with fear now carried voices of wonder and hope. Great ships hovered above like silent guardians, their lights bright against the night sky. Warriors stood watch at the gates, their armor gleaming in the sun. They did not threaten, they did not harm. They simply stood, a living shield for the people below. At first, many in the colony did not know how to act. They whispered when they passed the warriors, keeping their distance. Children peeked from behind corners, their eyes wide with curiosity. Traders worried that the presence of aliens would drive away business. But soon they found the opposite to be true. Visitors from other colonies began to arrive, eager to see the place where 200 alien warriors had sworn loyalty because of the kindness of a boy. And everywhere, people spoke Rami's name. For years he had been ignored. Now when he walked through the marketplace, people greeted him with smiles. Some offered him food, some gave him clothes. Children ran beside him, asking him to tell the story again of the night he found the dying alien. Rami felt shy under their gaze, but he told the truth in simple words. "I saw him weak. I gave what I had. That is all." The alien leader often visited him. He treated Rami not as a child, but as someone of honor. "Your gift was small in your eyes," he told him, "but to us it was greater than armies. You saved one of ours without knowing who we were. That act shows the heart of your kind." The scout who had been saved appeared again as well. He had healed, his strength returned. When he saw Rami, he knelt, lowering his tall form so that his head bowed to the boy. "Your blanket gave me life. Without it, I would have been lost. I carry your kindness with every breath." Rami's eyes filled with tears. He had never been thanked before in such a way. He reached out and touched the scout's hand, and in that moment he felt that the bond between them was more than words. It was something unbroken, something eternal. As the weeks passed, the colony grew stronger. With alien protection, no raiders dared attack. Trade increased and food became easier to find. The people who once turned away from Rami now sought his guidance. They asked his thoughts on matters of peace, for they believed that if his heart had been wise enough to save a stranger, then his voice was worth hearing. At first, Rami did not know how to answer. He was still the same boy who once searched for scraps in the dirt. But slowly he learned to speak with care. He reminded people to share what they had, to treat others with kindness, to remember that even the smallest act could carry great weight. His words spread not just in the colony, but through the mouths of traders who carried them to distant settlements. The alien warriors remained loyal. They trained alongside the human soldiers, teaching them discipline and unity. Where once there had been fear between the two species, now there was respect. Children grew up seeing humans and aliens walk side by side, and they did not learn the fear that their parents once carried. One night, the leader of the warriors gathered the people in the square. The ships above cast soft light, and the air was filled with quiet expectation. The leader's voice rang out. "This child gave us a gift that cannot be measured. We will carry his story across the stars. Wherever our people travel, they will tell of the boy who gave his only blanket to a dying scout. His name will not be forgotten." Rami stood beside him, holding the blanket close. It was old and worn, but to him it was still the most precious thing he had. He felt his cheeks grow warm as thousands of eyes looked at him, but he stood tall. The leader turned to the crowd. "Let this be your lesson. True strength is not in weapons, not in wealth, not in power. True strength is in kindness. That is what this boy has shown us. That is what we now honor." The warriors struck their weapons against the ground, the sound rolling like thunder. The people cheered, their voices rising high into the night sky. From that day onward, stories spread beyond the colony. Traders carried tales of Rami to distant worlds. They spoke of the boy who had been forgotten, who had no food and no home, yet whose kindness had brought 200 warriors to his side. They spoke of the boy who turned fear into hope, weakness into strength. As time passed, visitors came from far away just to see him. Some wanted to meet the boy who had changed the fate of his colony. Others wanted to hear the story told from his own lips. Rami never claimed greatness. He always said the same words. "I only wanted him to live." But those words became greater than he knew. Across alien worlds, his story was told as a lesson to young warriors. Across human colonies, his name was remembered in songs and writings. He became a symbol that even the smallest person, with nothing to give but kindness, could change the course of history. Years later, when Rami had grown taller and stronger, he often looked up at the sky. The great ships still watched over the colony, though their presence had become a familiar comfort. The scout he had saved remained a close friend, visiting him often, sharing stories of distant stars. The leader of the warriors treated him as family, guiding him with wisdom. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in red and gold, Rami sat on a hill overlooking the colony. The blanket lay across his lap, patched and repaired many times, yet still whole. Children ran nearby, laughing as they played. Alien warriors stood at the gates, their armor glowing in the fading light. Rami thought of his younger self, the boy who had once sat cold and hungry in the streets. He thought of the night when he had chosen to give away his only treasure. At that time, he had believed it was a small act, almost nothing. Yet that act had carried farther than the stars. He smiled to himself. Sometimes the smallest gift becomes the greatest legacy, and so it was. His story lived not only in the colony but across worlds. His kindness had built a bridge between species, a bond stronger than fear, stronger than war. Long after his days were over, his name would be remembered, carried in the voices of humans and aliens alike. The boy who gave his only blanket had changed the universe.